High above the whispering valley, where the air was thin and the stone peaks scraped the belly of the sky, lived a herd of mountain goats known as the cloud steppers. They were famous throughout the animal kingdom for their agility, their sure-footed balance, and their perfect, dignified posture. Among them was a young goat named Bumper. Bumper had a shaggy coat the color of moss, two perpetually worried eyebrows, and hooves that seemed to have minds of their own. While the other goats moved with graceful, quiet tap-taps along the narrowest ledges, Bumper moved with noisy, awkward clumps. He was, quite simply, clumsy. He tripped over invisible pebbles, he stumbled on flat ground, and he was constantly bumping into the nearest thing. Bumper felt a constant, deep shame about his clumsiness. He would watch Stoic, the herd leader, a magnificent goat with tall, sharp horns and a serious, unmoving face, and wish he could be as still and perfect. "Bumper," Stoic would often sigh, his voice like the grinding of small stones. "Must you always be so much? Try to be less. Less noise, less movement, less clump." Bumper would try. Oh, how he would try. He would practice balancing on a single rock until his hooves shook. But the moment he thought he had mastered it, he'd twitch his tail in triumph and send himself tumbling. The tumbling didn't hurt, but it always filled him with a miserable feeling of failure. One particularly misty morning, a heavy blanket of sad gray clouds had settled low over the misty peaks. The air was damp and everyone was gloomy. The gray clouds seemed to soak up all the light and cheer, making even Stoic look a little flat. "This gloom is terrible," complained a doe. "It lasts for days. If only we could push the gray away." Bumper, feeling utterly useless, wandered off to a quiet, solitary ridge. He was practicing his quiet step when he misjudged the height of a low-hanging rock. With a startled eep and a clumsy lurch, he twisted sideways and bumped his shaggy flank hard against the thick, dense gray cloud that had settled right next to the cliff edge. It was just a small, accidental bump, but as Bumper stood up, brushing the damp mist from his coat, he noticed something impossible. Where his flank had hit the gray cloud, a small, vibrant patch of sunny, cheerful yellow had bloomed. Bumper blinked his worried eyes. He shook his head and looked again. The spot was still bright yellow, shimmering in the dull gray mist. Did I imagine that? He wondered. He carefully took a hop backward, his heart fluttering with a mix of fear and curiosity. Then he tried another clumsy lurch, this time aiming his rear a little higher. Clump! He bumped the cloud again. This time, a splash of brilliant, powerful red spread through the gray. Bumper let out a quiet gasp of astonishment. He wasn't pushing the gray away. He was painting it with his bumps. His clumsiness, the very thing he hated about himself, was creating magic. Filled with a giddy, joyful energy he had never felt before, Bumper began to move. He stopped trying to be graceful. He started embracing his clump, clump, clump. He started to flail his legs and wobble his head, performing the clumsiest, most joyful dance ever seen on the Misty Peaks. He twisted, he spun, he lunged, and every accidental, glorious collision with the gray clouds filled them with magnificent color. Clump, green like fresh spring grass. Stumble, purple like lavender fields. Tumble, a swirling bright orange. He was a whirlwind of joyous mistakes, and the sky began to transform. The great gray blanket ripped and swirled, becoming a masterpiece of magnificent, unexpected colors. The valley below, which had been suffering under the endless gloom, suddenly saw a flash of brilliant light. Up on the peaks, the other cloud steppers were speechless. Stoic, the dignified leader, watched with his mouth slightly ajar. He couldn't believe his eyes. The clumsy, awkward Bumper was making the most beautiful sky they had ever seen. The gloom lifted instantly, replaced by a feeling of warm, unexpected happiness. The other goats cautiously approached Bumper, who was now taking a break, panting happily with his shaggy coat covered in misty rainbow dust. "Bumper," Stoic finally managed, his serious voice softer than before, How did you learn to do that?" He simply shuffled his hooves, no longer ashamed of their clump clump. "I didn't learn to do it. I stopped trying to be graceful and started being myself. I used my clumsiness." He pointed to the last patch of gray cloud. "Watch." He took a careful, perfect step and tapped the cloud gently. Nothing happened. The gray stayed gray. Then with a joyous snort and a determined clump, he leapt and accidentally knocked his knee against the cloud. Whoosh! A glorious splash of sunny yellow burst forth. The other goats understood. Their dignified, perfect tap-taps were too precise, too controlled. They were not capable of the happy, accidental force that Bumper's clumsy clump wrought. The cloud painter of the Misty Peaks was not a neat artist. He was an artist of magnificent, wonderful mistakes. From that day on, when the gloom settled, the cloud steppers didn't sigh. They would cheer for Bumper, the messy, magnificent, and cheerful goat with the perpetually worried eyebrows. They realized that their perfection was good for walking narrow ledges, but Bumper's glorious imperfection was exactly what the world needed to bring color and cheer. Bumper never felt ashamed of his clumsiness again. He knew that sometimes the things you think are your biggest flaws are actually your greatest, most beautiful strengths. The moral of Bumper's story is that perfection is overrated. Don't hide the things that make you different or feel like mistakes. Embrace your unique way of being, because your biggest flaw might be the very thing that brings unexpected magic and beauty to the world.